Hey, welcome to Gary's Shortlist podcast. Today we're in for a treat. We're having a chat with Jeremy Owens. Jeremy is a builder, a third generation builder in his family business in Northern California. Jeremy is also a founder of the US Construction Zone. It's a platform to get like-minded construction professionals to get together and speak about innovation and the issues they may have, that they can collectively have a conversation about and make a difference. Jeremy and I are going to have a chat about resourcing, materials, programming, and everything in between in regard to issues and just to get an idea about the synergy between construction in the US and in Australia. So enjoy Jeremy Owens. Jeremy, welcome to Gary's Shortlist podcast. Thank you so much for joining us from Northern California. It's obviously afternoon there. It's bright and early, beautiful morning here in Sydney, Australia. Jeremy, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. I am Jeremy Owens, and I own a business called 3 Generations Improvements, and we do remodeling, which I guess you guys call refurbishment, in Northern California. And so we're up in Folsom, and so we kind of, our territories in Northern California, Bay Area kind of markets. And I've been doing it since 2002, but my family business has been really started. My grandpa started in 1956. So that's when my roots start in the construction industry. And as a boy, I was going out on leads with my dad when I was 10. And I think I probably fell in love with it then. But wow. I did the college thing and, did my due diligence and went into marketing. And then kind of after graduation, I was like, what am I doing, man? Just stick with what I know. And, soon thereafter, my dad kind of gave me the reins of the company to me. And ever since then, I've been, having a lot of fun.
No pressure, man.
Yeah, no pressure. No, it's been pretty cool. I think a lot of family businesses do have that. It's not easy for a lot of people, but my dad doesn't have a lot of pride, and he's a real easygoing guy. So that's why he's my role model in construction, because he's like, hey, you're going to be better at this than I could be. You take the reins, I'll do what I'm good at, and we'll have some fun. And sure enough, we are.
That's great. And the sort of refurbishment or remodeling, as you guys call it, what does that look like? Is it, sort of try to describe that for us?
Yeah, sure. We specialize in exterior home improvements. So we do siding, windows, decking, patio covers, everything on the outside of a house. So, Northern California, no shortage of homes around here, right? So it's a constant, we're always busy, to be honest. Even in slow economies, it tends to be pretty good because there's so many homes that need remodeling. And exteriors tend to be, kind of a need thing. They're usually not, a wish, like you're not, putting in an outdoor kitchen. It's usually like, hey, I got to get this siding taken care of. It's falling off the house kind of thing. And that's what we specialize in.
Terrific. And I guess for the listeners, I think the reason we've connected and why I thought you'd be so interesting for the listeners to have to tune into today is just for the Aussies here to understand what the landscape's like there in construction in the US, because I to be quite honest, I don't really know anything about construction in the US, and I'm throwing a dart here, but I would gather you have similar issues with labor shortage, with material supply, with tough programs and unions and everything in between.
Yeah, I would say that we're not unlike your guys' problems, maybe even more so. I think our labor issues really started really in the downturn of the economy. And you remember in 2008, global economy crisis that we all had. There was a giant push for getting everyone in college, and so it was like a nationwide push, like, hey, every young kid should go to college. And everyone was like, okay, I guess that's what we need to do. And pretty much everyone was in college, and then no one wanted to be in the trades. So for us, we've had a problem with labor for 7 years, but this year is the worst by far. So it is like a giant spotlight when the pandemic hit for us. a giant spotlight was put on the construction industry, and I think front center is our labor issues.
So that leads us into, I guess, the US construction zone, the body that you're leading, and so how did that come about? Was that a result of some of these issues?
Yeah, it kind of was. It was. I was at a conference probably about 3 years ago. It was a remodeling conference where owners get together. You do a roundtable thing. You have presenters speak and all that. I'm sure you guys have the same things going on there. And at the end of the conference, we're all just kind of exchanging business cards. Kind of knowing that we weren't probably going to connect through the year. And a gentleman from Tennessee kind of just said to me, "Hey," he's like, "I wish there was a better way for us to connect through the year." And the reason that we needed to connect was that problems like labor shortage, like we're talking about, supply issues, all these things that come our way, there's always going to be problems, right? We can talk about the labor shortage and supply issues now, but in 10 years, it's going to be something different. It's going to be replaced with another problem. And so the problem with the states is that we have a lot of trade organizations. I'm sure you guys have them too, where we have a trade organization for commercial construction, we have a trade organization for plumbers and electricians, but we don't have an organization where owners and executive levels get together and talk about these pain points that we have.
Yeah.
And so that was the idea. It was like, hey, why not create a platform called US Construction Zone, where I'm just essentially creating the platform to connect. And it's just the high level connections. It's not, the Chuck in the truck talking about PVC pipe. This is these kind of topics that we're talking about today. How can we get together and talk about, hey, what are you doing to succeed here? And because I'm hurting, or how are you advertising now? Or what are you doing for HR or for you, safety? That's a hot button topic too. Like, what are you using? What software are you using? And now what we're having too in the States is that technology is really ramping up. So we have a technology sector that is like go straight up. And that's great because it's helped replacing some of our labor and our efficiency problems that we've had. But it's still so far behind, just like you were saying, Gary, it's like so far behind the rest of the sectors. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why, but we're still catching up.
Yeah, I think we still like to stick the pencil behind our ear and assure ourselves everything will be fine. It's how are you finding that connection and sharing of information? Because the reason I ask that, in Australia, particularly with the bigger builders, there seems to be quite a culture of keeping things to their close to their chest, because Builder X is a competitor. And you're right, we do have conferences and we do have the ability to go and share information, but I was the chairman of the Construction and Safety Alliance for a very long time here in Sydney, and it was sometimes like pulling teeth getting feedback and sharing of that information in that room, because there's a lot of competition in that room commercially.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the difference maybe for the States is that most of our industries only compete locally. So, there's very few companies that are big enough to span the entire U.S. Sometimes there'll be one company that carves out like a West or a Southeast kind of territory, but for the most part, we're local. I mean, we're 100 miles. So when you think about the U.S., you're like, man, we're pretty open. Our industry in the States, they're pretty open. We're wanting to share ideas because honestly, we're struggling in a lot of these areas, whether they be management or leadership or labor shortage. We're at a point now where we're like, hey man, if I go to Google and try to ask these questions, what's going to happen? I'm going to get sold on different softwares and all this, but I need to ask somebody who's been through it. I need to ask up here. And so that's really what the idea was like, hey, I don't have the answers. That's the only thing I know, is that I don't have the best answer. So how am I going to find the best answer? And I want to ask somebody who's been through it. I don't want to ask, I hate to bring up college. I want to ask a professor. I want to ask a professional who's been in the industry a long time. And that's why I wanted to kind of create that connection point for our industry.
Great. And how's it going? Like, how do you feel it's progressing?
Yeah, so we're actually you caught me at the right time. We're actually launching October 1st, so this is our last week of kind of creating connections. So we have a large list of kind of early adopter users that are ready to jump on the platform October 1st and go. But these we spent this pandemic year or two kind of creating the platform, talking to other professionals, finding out what they want to see there. So now we're down to the wire here, and so October 1st we're gonna hit go, and who knows, right?
That's terrific.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Perhaps you, when it's launched, and perhaps when it's very successful, you can start up the Australian construction zone, huh?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's really the idea was, hey, I think that we've already talked about it. Like our problems are pretty similar, right? We call it U.S. construction zone, but we're not limiting it to that right now. If we have somebody that's a professional in the UK or in Australia or wherever, and they want to connect and find out what's going on, hey, this is about a professional network. If you're a professional and you're looking at the same news feeds that we are, hey, it's a small world these days, man. I mean, I think our issues are very similar, and why not connect and figure out how we're solving these problems? Because maybe another country's got to figure it out better than we have, but I can tell you right now that the states, we have some problems, and there's an infrastructure bill that came out that Biden's been supporting, and I don't know if that maybe it hit your news there in Australia, that it's like a 1.3 billion dollar infrastructure just to redo our roadways and bridges and all these things that are coming about. But it came at us this year, and we don't have the labor to support it,
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
supply, or the
yeah.
supply. So as the industry, we're going, that's great on paper. We need all those things, but can we perform it as an industry? And I would say right now we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. And back to your earlier comment about the push for people years ago to go to uni, or in Australia we call it TAFE, or a trade institution, to
Yeah.
actually go and learn some hands-on skill, and that's sort of fallen by the wayside.
Hmm.
Regardless of what government's been in power, I think, and we are feeling the effects now. I mean, um, some organisations out there many years ago would have 50 to 100 apprentices in their business,
Right.
where now it's next to zero in
Yeah.
most major organisations, because those kids have either taken another path, because that opportunity hasn't been open there. Another thing, talking about infrastructure, I mean, Sydney's in a similar position with, for example, building an airport just on the fringe of Sydney, a brand new airport. Like you say, it's great on paper, and it makes great news, but who's going to build it, right? Where are these people, these hands, going to come from? And
Right.
that's really interesting as well. It's a shame. I guess it's a shame that it has to get to, with all these smart people in the world, it has to get to a point where you haven't got anything in the bucket, and then you turn around and go, see, I told you we needed to invest in trade and others. And for Australia, including America, a lot of it's been offshore. So in Australia at the moment, we are having a lot of problem getting timber, a lot of
Right.
trouble getting steel.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that trade has left Australia, and left us in little bit of trouble right at this point.
Yeah, I think I don't know for you guys. Do you guys have trade like trade schools? Like, did you guys have like wood shop in high school and things like that?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, so that went away for us when I was growing up. It was like we were the last generation to get that, and then basically our entire U.S. like they started pulling those things and saying we don't want mechanics, we don't need trade schools. Everyone needs to go to college, and there was a lot of really professional people here in the states, really led by, I don't know if you know Mike Rowe, but Mike Rowe's he does a lot of things on TV. He has a show called Dirty Jobs where he really highlights. He calls it the skills gap. Like we have a skills gap problem, and he's been talking about it for 10 years, knowing that this was happening. And
yeah,
sure enough, now he's being invited to the White House to discuss this issue, because we've taken all those programs away, and we need, not everybody needs to go to college. There's some people who like to work with their hands, and the money's good. I mean, the states right now, our average job for a construction worker is $35 an hour. that's not too bad. And if you're in the service industry, if you're a hotel worker or a restaurant, you're closer to 18. So we have good money where we're willing to pay, but it was like a stigma. Like, if you want to work with your hands, you're lesser than, or
Yeah, yeah.
and that
It's
crept into parenting, right? Parenting, you start telling your kids, no, you need to go to college, and even if they have a passion for something in the trades, they were kind of told not to.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? When Gary Vaynerchuk. I listen to a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk, and he talks about this push that people have with their kids to go to university and become doctors and lawyers and stuff like that, because the parents didn't become doctors and lawyers, so they feel that they need to get their kids to be successful in that degree, and then the kid does a 7-year degree and comes out and, well, perhaps not a kid anymore, comes out and says, you know what, I don't like medicine, or I don't like law. I would far have, preferred to have been a plumber and earning, similar to what you said. In Australia, our wages are very, very, very generous in the construction industry.
Sure.
And some of the the wealthiest people around town, and have got the flash car, and have multiple houses and investment properties of the plumbers, and the electricians, which is great. Which is
Right.
great to see.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I love it.
so, Jeremy, why we're here? I'd love to ask you if you could give us a broad brush sort of feeling of how safety operates in the US, in perhaps the smaller builder, and what the expectations are, and then perhaps in the bigger organisations, and what those challenges are.
Yeah, I would say it's strange. I would say that I would describe a lot of our systems as very fractured. Like, so we get a lot of push from government agencies. We have OSHA out here. It's a very
Yeah,
large safety program. I'm sure you're aware of it. And there's a lot of empty threats. I would say would be a very common thing. Where, for a good example is the lead paint issue that we have in the states. So anything prior to 1978, could have lead paint in it. So there was a real push to making sure contractors are telling their clients about this lead paint issue. And they went so far as to say, if you don't follow these steps, then we will fine you $37,000 per day. So it's just a giant number and a giant threat, and we're all going like, "Wow, that's a giant number, right?" And it just, you don't ever hear about it being enforced. So there's just a lot of push for regulation, and safety is important. Trust me, as a small family business, there's nothing more important than keeping your guys safe, and there's nothing that could break your back quicker than someone falling off a roof, right? So we definitely understand that safety is important. I think the problem that we're having is that they have so much power on the labor side of business right now, that you can tell people all the things you want to do in the world, but they have all the power. And so you're saying, like, you need to do X, Y, Z, you need to do this laundry list of things you need to do. And they'll tell you to go take a hike. I'm going to go work over here for
yeah,
$10
yeah,
more an hour. So it's harder more than ever to speak about the importance of safety, because
yeah,
we don't have the power that we used to.
yeah, yeah. Australia went through a similar phase quite a few years ago. And you're right. Some of the contractors that the bigger builders were using were like, you know what, guys, this is all too hard. You're asking me to jump through so many hoops. I can
Right.
go and work for the builder up the road there, and it's going to have less impact on my cost and my time, and
Right.
everything else. So it is that juggling act. It's funny, isn't it? That's an interesting story you say about the $30,000 a day threat. Um,
Yeah.
it's similar in Australia. It's a very punitive industry, safety,
Yeah.
and the threats and the fines, and everything in between, doesn't seem to work, in my opinion, in its completed entirety.
Right.
It's like saying, we will have zero car accidents in Australia, and if anyone has a car accident, we're going to come and fine you $37,000. Like, that's
Right.
not going to stop car accidents. So, um,
Right.
yeah, anyway, yeah, that's another path, and that's maybe another discussion.
It's unfortunate. I think that, as you layer the enforcement, and as you layer government overreach sometimes. It just, they don't have the staffing to come check job sites. So you can keep adding stuff all you want, but if you don't have the staff to come and actually check in on people, then I think it becomes a hollow thread. And I think of the industry in general, they kind of go, yeah, right. And as a small business, we do it. We cross our T's and dot our I's. We want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a liability risk. But at the same time, our competitors aren't. So it's a real hard sell, because you're like, hey, we're speaking to you about this issue. Is anybody else? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
And so you're like, great. It's
Yeah.
the deck is not stacked to your favor again. And so it's frustrating, because I wish it was just like a little bit easier to manage, I guess.
Yep. No, I totally concur with you there. So the outlook for 2022 looks very positive in the States, I would think.
Interesting. I think I think it depend on who you ask. I would say that, inflation's really high for us right now, that there's a lot of red flags for an economy dip. And our stock market's crazy too high, and our housing's too high. So it kind of feels a lot like 2008 to us. I think the difference, I was talking to my wife about it the other day. I was like, the difference between 2008 and today is that there are thousands of jobs around us. Like in 2008, when all these things happened, and for us, really huge housing crisis really shook our world, is that there was no jobs. Like you couldn't go get a job. Now
Right.
Everyone's hiring. It could be a restaurant, it could be Home Depot. No matter where you go, there's a hiring sign, because not a lot of people want to work. So it feels different in that something happens to me and my business personally. I'm the type, I'm gonna go get a job right now. Like I'm not gonna go get on unemployment. I am gonna go get my job because I have to support my family, and that's the way I was raised. But so it feels a little different. But I think that there's some red flags in terms of something's got to give. Our government needs to kind of rip the Band-Aid off a little bit and kind of let things fall where they may. And I think the economy may dip a little bit. But when it comes to refurbishment, as you say, and construction, typically, we don't have those big dips and raises like other industries do. So I do feel fortunate that I think we're in a pretty good spot, good industry. I just wish we had the labor to help support us and move us forward a little faster. Our growth is stunted because we don't have supply, or we don't have labor, so we can't really grow too fast. I can't sell any more jobs, right? What am I going to do with it? I'm going to tell them that we'll get to you in a year. Like,
Yeah.
It doesn't work. We're a little bit stunted, a little bit, I guess discouraged would be a good word.
Yeah. I was talking to quite a senior guy in construction, credible source here in Sydney last week, and I asked him what his thoughts of the outlook in construction are in the short and long term in Australia. And and the reason I asked him is similar to what you just said. There are lots of jobs out there at the moment. Even though Sydney is still technically in a lockdown with COVID, we're seeing a lot of activity. So that prompted me to ask him the question: what do you think it's going to look like in the short term? And his comment to me was, we will tick along quite nicely up until about Easter. So what's that, 6 months? And at about that point in Easter, those big infrastructure projects that the government have been talking about, airport and many, many others, will really, really kick in. And he said, hold on to your hat. If everything in between is good, the unforeseen and all that kind of stuff.
Right. I mean, what is Australia doing with the labor? Are they, because what happened for us a lot was when Trump was in office here, immigration dried up. So we used to have a steady flow of, whether they're, from Mexico or Ukraine, Russia. For us is a large labor source. That dried up. And for us, when that dried up, we don't have young people wanting to swing a hammer. So who's going to swing a hammer? So how are you guys getting the young people, the replacement labor?
Yeah, look, it sort of drips in. I guess when some of these young guys and girls that complete school and get to that point that we all got to and go like, am I going to uni? Am I going to go and earn ridiculous money to look just like my mate.
Yeah.
I'm 19 years old. I can go and earn 100,000 Aussie dollars a
Sure.
year and have plenty of work, plenty of laughs, and everything in between. So it's those guys are dripping in to the industry, and I think it'd be fair to say that the industry does attract a lot of the 30 to 40-year-old people from other sectors that have just sort of gone down a path and they've said, you know what, this isn't for me. Construction is a great alternative. However, in regard to immigration and building trade networks here in Australia, it's next to zero. I mean, our agriculture industry in Australia relies heavily on the tour, on the tourists coming here to pick fruit, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't got anybody because we haven't had a plane coming in the country. So, we've got, that's another big issue for the agriculture industry, that we've got fruit sitting on trees that no one can pick. The Aussies are going, why would I pick fruit when I can go and swing a hammer in construction? So
yeah, that's cool that you're getting that. It's funny from a supply standpoint. I mean, we're so bad. In fact, there's recent news in Long Beach, where a giant port is for us, for our supply in California. There was something like 50 ships, cargo ships, in line in Long Beach. They could not get to port because there was not enough labor to offload.
mm,
And so all of those things are products that, grocery stores, lumber, materials, you name it. It's things are now our shelves are getting kind of bare again. We're like, what happened? And sure enough, we look at the news and we can't get their cargo ships offloaded. And even when we offload it and get it to a yard, it takes another month to get that unloaded and then onto a truck and then to where it needs to go. So it's hitting every sector for us. It's not just construction that's having labor issues. It is like everything. So that's why it's weird. It's like what. And part of the problem in the States is that we have unemployment that is too high. So a lot of people during the pandemic, they said, I'm just going on unemployment and I'll be damned, I'm making more now. And the government has not ripped that Band-Aid off and lowered it down to a reasonable rate. So there's so many people sitting at home when all these jobs are ready to fill. So,
Yeah, we've had a similar thing here in Australia, where the government support has been quite generous, I think. And again, there's builders out there saying, "Come on, we've got to get going, guys," and that shortage is there. And I think we're only weeks away before the government turns that switch off, and everybody will come running back to work, perhaps.
I think we have to at some point. We're going to have to all get back to some sort of normalcy. And I know you guys have had a longer run at that than we have. We're pretty much wide open now. I mean, we're masked up and we're being careful and things like that, but I'm coaching sports again, and it feels pretty good to be out and about. So I'm sure you guys are getting antsy out there in Australia, huh?
Yeah, look, it's been I think it's 3 months, which is our second bout of lockdown, and it's getting to the point where, although it does look like in the next couple of weeks that that we'll be given the freedom. I think it's called Freedom Day. They're calling it. Somebody's got to make a slogan, right? Look, Jeremy, it has been my absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, and I really appreciate your time coming all the way from Folsom in Northern California. Obviously famous by Johnny Cash.
That's right.
And you're probably sick of hearing that, but
we don't mind. It puts us on the map, I guess, right?
Indeed, and good luck with the official launching of the construction zone, the US construction zone. If any of our listeners want to jump on, can jump on Google or jump on US construction zone to see what you guys are doing.
Exactly. usconstructionzone.com. You can click on the link there to gain early access. And we're really looking for what we call Founders Club. So these are people who see the vision, the early adopters that say, hey, I know we need connection. And I know that as an industry, we're missing it. So those people are going to have a special place in the platform. And we want those people to help kind of guide us. Where are we going from here? What do we need to add?
And are you guys open to having some Aussies on there that can just be a sounding board?
Yeah, no, I would say yes. I would say if you have a listener here that we're describing, these people, pretty much the people who are listening to your podcast that are in construction, that these are the ones that are picking up the trade magazines, or are they care about the industry. They want to leave the industry better than they found it. Then you have a place, and it might be a good sounding more like you said, where hey, well, this is what our country is doing, not what our state is doing. Hey, this is how we're tackling the problem. Hey, why not, man? Join the
Yeah,
club.
that's terrific. I encourage our listeners to go and take a look. And thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today.
Thanks.
And yeah, on behalf of all of our listeners, we wish you the best and a great outlook for next year in construction.
All right, you as well. Take care.
Cheers, Jeremy.
See
Jeremy
ya.
Owens.